Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life by Marshall B. Rosenberg. Picture this, a cramped mosque in a Bethlehem refugee camp, packed with 170 Palestinian men. The air feels electric, dangerous. An American stands at the front of the room, and right now, being American makes him enemy number one. A ripple moves through the crowd. Whispers become murmurs. His translator's face goes pale. "They know you're American," he warns. Before the words even settle, a man shoots to his feet. His finger stabs toward the American like a weapon. Then he screams at the top of his lungs, "Murderer!" The room explodes. Voices pile on top of each other. "Assassin! Child killer! Murderer!" The American is Marshall Rosenberg. His life might be hanging by a thread. He has options: defend himself, strike back, run. Or he could try something so unexpected, so completely different, it might just stop violence dead in its tracks. What would you do in that moment? What words could possibly meet that wall of rage and somehow transform it into connection? That question holds the secret we're unlocking today. Nonviolent Communication isn't just another self-help book. It's a blueprint for being human in a completely different way. Over 5 million copies sold, translated into more than 35 languages, all because it tackles something we all struggle with. We've been taught to speak in judgment, blame, and demands, when what we're actually starving for is understanding and connection. Marshall Rosenberg didn't discover this in some peaceful meditation retreat. He learned it in the fire. Growing up during Detroit's brutal 1943 race riots, hiding in his house for days while violence raged outside, he couldn't stop asking himself, what makes people so violent? And what allows some people to stay compassionate even in hell? His search for answers became his life's mission, taking him from the killing fields of Rwanda and Serbia to hostile boardrooms and shattered families. What he found was a 4-step process so powerful it feels like a secret language that speaks directly to the heart. Here's my promise. By the end of our time together, you'll have this 4-step key in your hands. You'll know how to turn conflict into connection, how to hear the real message behind anyone's words, no matter how cruel they sound, and how to ask for what you want in a way that makes people actually want to help you. This isn't about being fake nice or swallowing your anger. It's about becoming more powerful, more honest, and more deeply connected than you ever imagined possible. So let's go back to that hostile room and see what happens next. There he stands, Marshall Rosenberg, an American, ringed by men, calling him a murderer. His heart must be hammering. The air practically crackles with rage. But instead of defending himself, he does something completely unexpected. He listens. Not just to the words, to the feeling underneath them. On his way into the camp, he'd seen empty tear gas canisters scattered on the ground, each one stamped with "Made in USA." He knew these people held deep fury toward his country for arming Israel. He looks at the man who screamed first. Instead of saying, "I'm not a murderer," he takes a guess at what the man actually needs. He asks, "Are you angry because you'd like my government to use its resources differently?" The man is caught off guard, but the anger keeps pouring out. "Damn right I'm angry. You think we need tear gas? We need sewers, we need housing, we need our own country." Rosenberg doesn't argue, he just reflects the need back. "So you're furious and you'd appreciate some support in improving your living conditions and gaining political independence?" The man continues, his voice heavy with 27 years of pain, sick children playing in sewage, schools with no books. With every accusation, Rosenberg doesn't hear an attack. He hears a gift. A human being showing his soul, his deepest vulnerabilities. He keeps reflecting what he hears. It sounds like you're feeling desperate. I hear how painful it is for you to raise your children here. This goes on for nearly 20 minutes. He doesn't agree or disagree, he just offers pure, focused empathy. Then something miraculous happens. The man, feeling truly heard maybe for the first time, stops shouting. The energy in the room shifts. The hostility melts. Once he felt understood, he was ready to hear what Rosenberg had to say. An hour later, this same man who'd called him a murderer invited him home for a Ramadan dinner. This is nonviolent communication in action. It's a language that cuts through all the noise of blame and judgment to connect with the shared humanity underneath. Rosenberg believes this is actually our natural state. We're born with compassion, with joy in giving and receiving. But somewhere along the way, we learn a different language. He calls it life-alienating communication. It's the language we speak every day, usually without realizing how destructive it is. Think about it. From birth, we're trained to compete, judge, demand, and diagnose. We think and talk about what's right and wrong with people. Your roommate is messy. Your boss is unreasonable. That driver who cut you off is an idiot. Your partner is needy. Or we turn it on ourselves. I'm so lazy. I'm not good enough. What's wrong with me? Rosenberg says these are all tragic expressions of unmet needs. When we label someone lazy, what we might really need is support or order. When we call our partner needy, we might need space or autonomy. But by using judgment language, we build walls instead of opening windows. When people hear criticism, they don't hear our need. They hear an attack. Their energy goes into self-defense or counterattack. Either way, real connection becomes impossible. Another form of this toxic language is comparison. Author Dan Greenberg once wrote a satirical book called How to Make Yourself Miserable. His advice? Just compare yourself to other people. Compare your body to a supermodel's. Compare your achievements to Mozart's at age 12. Guaranteed misery, because it constantly blocks compassion for ourselves. Perhaps the sneakiest form of this language is denying responsibility. We use phrases that hide our power to choose. I have to go to work. My boss made me do it. I had to suspend you. It's school policy. Rosenberg tells a story about a teacher who hated giving grades. She told him, I have to give grades. It's district policy. He asked her to rephrase it. I choose to give grades because I want. She immediately said, I choose to give grades because I want to keep my job. Then she paused. But I don't like saying it that way. It makes me feel so responsible for what I'm doing. That's exactly why I want you to say it that way, Rosenberg replied. When we're not conscious of our responsibility for our thoughts, feelings, and actions, we become dangerous. We become docile, obedient, disconnected from our own inner lives. As Rosenberg puts it, when we're in contact with our feelings and needs, we don't make good slaves anymore. So if that's the problem, this ingrained, life-draining language, what's the solution? Rosenberg offers a simple but profoundly transformative four-step process. It's exactly what he used in that mosque. The four components: observations, feelings, needs, and requests. Let's break down these four keys. First key: observing without evaluating. Sounds simple, right? But as philosopher J. Krishnamurti said, it's the highest form of human intelligence. For most of us, it's incredibly hard. We're trained to mix what we see with our opinion of it. If a colleague speaks for most of a meeting, we don't say, during that 1-hour meeting you spoke for about 45 minutes. We say, you dominate conversations, or you have a big mouth. The first is an observation. The second is an evaluation. When people hear evaluation, they hear criticism. When they hear observation, they hear facts. It creates shared reality where real conversation can begin. Rosenberg gives an example from a school where teachers were fighting with their principal. He asked them, "What is the principal doing that conflicts with your needs?" First teacher: "He has a big mouth." That's evaluation. Second: "He talks too much." Still evaluation. Third: "He thinks only he has anything worth saying." Not observation. That's mind reading. After some work, they finally reached an observation. During faculty meetings, the principal often tells stories about his childhood, which makes the meetings run 20 minutes overtime. See the difference? You have a big mouth creates instant defensiveness. But when our meetings run 20 minutes overtime, it conflicts with my need to get home to my family, opens the door for actual conversation. Words like always, never, or frequently are often disguised evaluations. "You're always busy" is exaggeration and evaluation. "The last 3 times I've asked you to dinner, you've said you were busy" is observation. This first step is about cleaning your lens, seeing what actually is, without the fog of judgment. Second key: identifying and expressing feelings. This is heart language. But for many of us, our emotional vocabulary is, as one psychoanalyst put it, as limited as a bugle call. We're taught to live in our heads, to value thinking the right way, not feeling. Rosenberg shares how when he was 9, he hid in a classroom because bullies were waiting for him. A teacher found him and told him to leave. When he explained he was afraid, she declared, "Big boys don't get frightened." We learn to suppress feelings, to disconnect from our inner world. The cost is heavy. He tells the story of a woman in a workshop who told her husband, "I feel like I'm married to a wall." Her husband predictably did a perfect wall impression, sat silent and immobile, confirming her image of him. What was she really feeling? Lonely. Wanting more emotional contact. But by saying, "I feel like I'm married to a wall," she was expressing a thought, an interpretation of his behavior, not a feeling. It came across as criticism, making him retreat further. A crucial distinction in nonviolent communication is separating what we feel from what we think. A common trap is using feel, followed by words like that, like, or as if. "I feel that you don't love me" is a thought about someone else's feelings. "I feel like a failure" is a thought, a self-assessment. "I feel misunderstood" is a thought about someone else's understanding. A true feeling in those situations might be, "I feel sad," or "I feel frustrated," or "I feel anxious." Expressing our vulnerability by sharing real feelings is one of the most powerful ways to create connection. It shows our humanness and invites others to connect with theirs. This leads to the third and maybe most powerful key: taking responsibility for our feelings by connecting them to our needs. This is the heart of nonviolent communication. Rosenberg makes a radical claim: no one can make you feel anything. What others say or do might trigger our feelings, but it's never the cause. The cause of our feelings is our own needs. Let's unpack that. Imagine someone says, "You're the most self-centered person I've ever met." According to Rosenberg, you have 4 ways to receive this. Option 1. Blame yourself. Take it personally and think, "I should have been more sensitive." This leads to guilt, shame, depression. Option 2. Blame the other person. Attack back. "You have no right to say that. You're the self-centered one." This leads to anger. These first 2 options are the worn paths of life-draining communication, but there are 2 other paths. Option 3. Sense your own feelings and needs. Shine consciousness inward. You might think, when I hear you say that, I feel hurt because I need my efforts to be recognized. Here, you connect hurt feelings to your need for recognition. You're taking responsibility. Option 4. Sense the other person's feelings and needs. Shine consciousness outward. Ask them, are you feeling hurt because you need more consideration for your preferences? You're looking for the need behind their attack. This is a game changer. When we understand that feelings come from needs, we stop being victims of what people say and do. If your partner arrives late for a date, you're not angry because they're late. You might feel hurt because you need reassurance that you matter, or frustrated because you need to use time purposefully, or even relieved because you needed quiet time alone. The trigger is the same, lateness, but the feeling changes depending on your need in that moment. Judgments, criticisms, and diagnoses of others are all alienated expressions of our own unmet needs. When a wife says, "You love your work more than me," she's tragically expressing an unmet need for intimacy. If we can speak directly from our needs, we have a much better shot at getting them met. But this is hard because most of us were never taught to think in terms of needs. We were taught to think about what's wrong with others. Rosenberg says at the root of all human action are universal needs, things like autonomy, celebration, integrity, interdependence, physical nurturance, play, and spiritual communion. These aren't wants or strategies. They're the universal engines of being human. When we connect at the level of needs, conflict dissolves because we see our shared humanity. Once we understand our observations, feelings, and needs, we're ready for the fourth key, requesting that which would enrich life. This is where we ask for actions that might fulfill our needs, but how we make requests is critical. First, use positive action language. Say what you do want, not what you don't want. A woman in a workshop complained her husband spent too much time at work. She said, "I asked him not to spend so much time at work." Result? 3 weeks later, he announced he'd signed up for a golf tournament. He heard what she didn't want but never heard what she did want. She realized later she should have said, "I'd like you to spend at least one evening a week at home with the children and me." Second, requests must be clear, specific, and about concrete actions. Vague requests like, "I want you to be more responsible," or "I want you to respect me," are doomed. What does responsibility look like in action? Taking out trash without being asked? Doing homework? The clearer we are, the more likely we get what we want. A woman told her husband, "I want you to let me be me." What does that even mean? After struggle, she translated it, "I guess what I want is for you to smile and say that anything I do is okay." At least now they both knew what she was asking for, even if it was a bit unrealistic. This clarity often reveals what we're really asking for, both to others and ourselves. Finally, and most importantly, learn the difference between a request and a demand. The difference? Simple. A request is something the other person can say no to without fear of punishment or blame. With a demand, if they say no, they'll be blamed or made to feel guilty. When people hear a demand, they see only two options: submission or rebellion. Neither comes from the heart. How do you know if you made a request or demand? By how you react if they say no. If you respond with blame or guilt-tripping, how typical of you to be so selfish. It was a demand. If you respond with empathy for the need preventing them from saying yes, so you're feeling worn out and needing rest this evening, it was a true request. The goal of nonviolent communication isn't getting your way. It's establishing relationships based on honesty and empathy, where everyone's needs can eventually be met. So we have the four components for expressing ourselves honestly: observations, feelings, needs, and requests. But nonviolent communication is a two-way street. The other half is hearing these same four things in others. This is receiving empathically. Empathy in nonviolent communication isn't sympathy or feeling sorry for someone. It's not advising, consoling, one-upping, or telling your own story. Those are all roadblocks to connection. Empathy is about presence, emptying our minds of judgments and theories, listening with our whole being, trying to understand what the other person is observing, feeling, needing, and requesting, even when their words are full of blame and judgment. This is exactly what Marshall Rosenberg did in that refugee camp. He didn't hear murderer. He heard the man's intense anger and guessed at his need for improved living conditions. No matter what people say, we can train ourselves to only hear what they're observing, feeling, needing, and requesting. This protects us from taking things personally. When we hear the needs behind words, we see shared humanity. We no longer see a monster. We see a human being in pain. A powerful empathy tool is paraphrasing. We reflect back what we heard, not parrot style, but as a question. Are you feeling hurt because you need more appreciation? This does two things: lets the speaker know they've been heard, and gives them a chance to correct us if we're wrong. A woman in a hospital was told by nurses that an elderly patient refused to eat or take medicine, just kept repeating, "I want to die." Nurses tried reassuring her, telling her she wasn't that sick. It didn't help. A volunteer trained in nonviolent communication went to the woman's room. The woman was whispering, "I want to die." The volunteer simply said, "So you would like to die?" The elderly woman was stunned. She stopped her chant and, for the first time, began talking about how terrible she felt and how no one understood. The volunteer just kept reflecting the woman's feelings. By the end, they sat with arms locked in deep connection. Later that day, the woman started eating and taking medicine. She hadn't needed reassurance. She'd needed empathy. But what happens when our own pain blocks our ability to empathize? Rosenberg says we need empathy to give empathy. If we're too triggered, too hurt, too angry, we have three choices. First, stop, breathe, and give ourselves emergency first aid empathy. Tune into our own feelings and needs. Second, scream non-violently. This doesn't mean screaming at someone. It means expressing raw pain without blame. "I'm in a lot of pain right now, and I really need some peace and quiet." Third, if all else fails, take a time out. Physically remove yourself to get the space and empathy you need to come back later in a different state. This brings us to one of the most difficult applications of nonviolent communication: expressing anger fully. Rosenberg's approach to anger is revolutionary. He says blaming, punishing, and hurting others are all superficial expressions of anger. At the core of all anger is a life-serving need that's not being fulfilled. Anger is a wake-up call, an alarm telling you two things. First, you have an important unmet need, and second, you're thinking in a way that makes it unlikely to be met. Specifically, you're blaming someone else. The cause of anger is never what someone else did. The cause is our own judgmental thinking. To express anger fully in nonviolent communication, 4 steps. 1. Stop and breathe. Don't do anything. 2. Identify your judgmental thoughts. What are you telling yourself? He has no right. She's completely unreasonable. 3. Connect with the needs behind those thoughts. What need isn't being met? Respect? Consideration? Safety? 4. Express your feelings and unmet needs. Instead of yelling, "That was racist," which is judgment, You might say, when you said that, I felt sick to my stomach because I have a deep need for equality and respect. Often, before expressing yourself, you may need to offer the other person empathy first. The more they feel heard, the more likely they'll be able to hear you. This whole process applies not just to others, but to the most important person you communicate with every day, yourself. This is self-compassion. When we make mistakes, our old programming kicks in. How could you be so stupid? I should have known better. This self-judgment creates shame and guilt, which aren't life-serving. Nonviolent communication offers a different path. Nonviolent communication, mourning, and self-forgiveness. When you do something you regret, first connect with the unmet need behind your action. What need wasn't met by your choice? When you connect with that need, you'll feel natural sadness or regret, not shame. This is mourning. Second is self-forgiveness. This comes from connecting with the need you were trying to meet when you made that regrettable choice. Every action we take attempts to serve a need, even if it's clumsy or tragic. When you can empathically hold both the self that regrets the action and the self that took it, you can learn and grow from mistakes without self-hatred. Rosenberg tells a story about ruining a brand new suit by putting an uncapped pen in his pocket. For 20 minutes he beat himself up. How could you be so careless? Then he stopped and applied nonviolent communication to himself. He realized his self-judgment came from an unmet need to take better care of himself. As soon as he connected with that need, shame disappeared, replaced by gentle sadness. Then he asked, what need was he trying to meet when he rushed and put the pen in his pocket? A need to care for workshop participants asking for his time. By holding both needs with compassion, caring for himself and caring for others, he could learn from the experience without self-hatred. This leads to radical advice from Rosenberg. Don't do anything that isn't play. He means we should make choices motivated purely by desire to contribute to life, rather than from fear, guilt, shame, duty, or obligation. He suggests an exercise. List everything you tell yourself you have to do. Then rewrite each item, starting with, I choose to, and complete the sentence with, because I want. This simple exercise reveals the needs our actions serve. Sometimes we realize we're doing things for reasons we don't value, like seeking approval or avoiding punishment, and we might choose to stop. Other times we reconnect with deep, life-serving values behind our chores and obligations, transforming them from burdens into acts of play. Even hard work feels like play when we're connected to the why behind it. Ultimately, nonviolent communication is more than a technique. It's a state of consciousness. It's a commitment to keep our attention focused, where compassion can flourish. It's a practice of liberating ourselves from cultural conditioning that leads to conflict, returning to the simple, profound truth of our shared human needs. It's a language of life. As we come to the end of this journey through nonviolent communication, it's worth pausing to reflect on what makes this book so enduringly powerful. In a world drowning in communication advice, tips for winning arguments, for persuading, for influencing, Marshall Rosenberg offers something radically different. He suggests the goal of communication isn't to win, but to connect. The most profound lesson for me is this idea that all human actions are attempts to meet universal needs. This is a seismic perspective shift. It means when someone's screaming at you, criticizing you, or acting seemingly irrational, they're not your enemy. They're a human being just like you, with a deep, valid, unmet need, expressing it tragically. If you can learn to see past the static of their strategy and hear the song of their need, everything changes. Conflict becomes an opportunity for connection. An attack becomes a plea for understanding. This isn't easy. It requires us to lay down our most cherished weapons, our right to be right, our judgments, our blame. But what we get in return is infinitely more valuable. We get peace, we get understanding, we get relationships grounded in authenticity and mutual respect. In today's fractured, polarized world, this skill isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. We're constantly encouraged to label one another, to sort people into good and bad, us and them. Nonviolent communication is a powerful antidote. It reminds us that behind every label, every political position, every angry tweet, there's a human being with needs for safety, respect, community, and meaning, the very same needs we all share. So how can you begin bringing this practice into your life right now? You don't have to be perfect. As Rosenberg would say, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Here are simple places to start. First, for the next day, just try separating observation from evaluation in one small interaction. When you're tempted to think, my friend is being flaky, pause and reframe it as observation. My friend has rescheduled our meeting twice this week. Notice how that small shift changes your internal feeling. Second, next time you feel a flash of anger, take one deep breath and ask yourself, what need of mine is not being met right now? You don't have to solve it. Just identifying the need is a powerful first step in transforming anger into something more life-serving. Third, try expressing one genuine appreciation using the nonviolent communication formula. Find someone in your life and say, when you describe specific action, I felt name your feeling, because my need for name, the need that was met, was fulfilled. For example, when you listened to me vent about my day without giving advice, I felt so relieved, because I really needed to feel heard and understood. Watch how this specific, heartfelt appreciation lands differently than a simple, thanks for listening. That was a summary of Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life, by Marshall B. Rosenberg. We've explored the core ideas today, but a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. The real adventure begins when you decide to travel there yourself. The true magic of this book unfolds in quiet reading moments, when a story resonates with your own life, or a simple phrase unlocks a new way of seeing an old problem. This summary is a doorway, an invitation. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a light in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you see yourself, your relationships, and the world around you. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to Billionaire's Bookshelf. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's continue to learn and grow together.